Welcome, everybody. I want to, first of all, say hello and introduce myself. My name is Lee Moriarty, and I am the Deputy Long-Term Care Ombudsman for the state of Illinois. And as you see underneath my name, it says Illinois Pioneer Coalition. That's because the Illinois Pioneer Coalition graciously allows us to use their Zoom site to be able to host these meetings, as we don't have a Zoom site with the state. And we feel that Zoom is the easiest way for everybody to be able to connect, because people really got used to it during COVID. So we've continued to use Zoom as our median for being able to have these meetings. So thank you to the Illinois Pioneer Coalition, who advocates for person-directed living in Illinois. So thank you to them for allowing us to use their site. A couple of other things I just want to remind everybody is that we do have the meetings are recorded, and we do post them after the meeting onto our YouTube channel, and that is ILTC Ombudsman YouTube. So you can go ahead and you can visit that site, and we have, I think we're just at about 90 videos on that site now. We've been doing these meetings for 4 years, and they've been wonderful. I know I continue to learn so much, because really the mission of these meetings is to empower everybody, those living in long-term care, those loving somebody in long-term care, those working in long-term care. We want to make sure that everybody feels fully empowered so that we can all do the best that we can for those that are living in long-term care. I see that that Karen is starting to put some of the links in the chat for us. She's one of the people who work behind the scene to make this event as wonderful as it can be. And she will start putting links in there for us. Stephen is the other one who does this, but he probably won't be able to join us today, as he was doing some training for our ombudsman today. So he may not be able to join us. So let's get into the topic a little bit. This is June. We are now in June 10th. I can't believe how the weeks and days just start flying by here. And June is actually Pride Month. And there's a lot of celebrations going around to help increase awareness, and to help bring forth a lot more information about how we could do better for those that are LGBTQ plus, and what we can do to increase our awareness, how we can support, to make sure that everybody's needs, because that is what we do as ombudsmen and with these meetings, is to empower people with information. So with that being said, we have Age Options is actually joining us today because they're doing some really cool things out there. And so we've got Nina and Christine who are joining us. And I see they both put their cameras on, so thank you for that. And I believe that I would like for you guys to share a little bit about who you are. And then I think Christina might be starting us off with talking about what an area agency on aging is, because people don't really necessarily always know what that is as well. So I'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to you guys.
Good. I was about to say good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nina Orlowski. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Aging with Pride program specialist at Age Options. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. I've been with the organization for a little over 2 years. And joining me today is my supervisor, Christina.
Thank you, Nina. Just make sure that we mute. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Christina Diaz. I'm the Community Programs Manager here at Age Options. And I oversee our caregiver program, our nutrition programs, as well as our, Aging with Pride initiatives. So we are going to dive a little bit deeper into what and who we are. Great.
And I got the pleasure of meeting Christina last week. We got together last week, I think it was, or the week before that. It was nice to be able to see face-to-face people.
Can I get a thumbs up if folks are able to see and hear? Great. Okay, so I can't see you all while I'm doing this, so I know someone's going to monitor questions and things like that while Christina and I share some information with you. So we'll start with Christina telling you a little bit about Age Options.
Thank you, Nina. There we go. Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for having us again. So we are representing Age Options. Age Options is designated under the Federal Older Americans Act as the Area Agency on Aging for suburban Cook County. We're the planning and service area number 13. We're lucky number 13. There's actually 13 area agencies on aging in Illinois. We were incorporated as a 501(c) nonprofit in 1974. Now, if you are ever in a bingo with us, that is a trick question. It comes up quite often. We serve predominantly the suburban Cook County region that surrounds the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago has their own area agency on aging, and they are actually more government-based. We have the second largest older adult population in the state. Our older adult population is rapidly growing and becoming increasingly diverse. According to the American Community Survey data, there are over 600,000 older adults and over 240,000 caregivers who reside in suburban Cook County. And of this number, about 15% or so are limited English speaking, and that does continue to change. Our mission is to innovate, partner, and advocate to improve systems and services in order to strengthen communities so people thrive as they age. Our values include commitment, integrity, and connectedness, and people thriving as they age is quite literally our vision as well. A couple of additional services that we provide through us as Age Options as an area agency on aging, or through our funded partners that we support, include information and assistance. So there are trained specialists who are able to answer questions about social services, housing, transportation options, health, medical insurance, benefits, and other resources for older adults and people with disabilities and our caregivers, in-house here at Age Options and through our funded agencies. We also offer housing assistance, which offers local assistance and resources to live affordably and safely in your home. Benefits access, which kind of provides a general overview of checking eligibility and applying for some of the assistance programs that are available. A few of which come to mind are Medicare, property tax programs, SNAP, for example. I know there's a lot going on administratively, unfortunately, with that. There are nutrition meals via the nutrition programs too, which help maintain, the nutrition scores relatively low and hopefully reach a broad community base through congregate meal sites, top box meals, which actually have groceries in their box that are delivered to actual clients, and also either home delivered meals that are cooked through the congregate meal sites as well. A couple of other resources and services that are offered are coordination of chore and housekeeping, caregiver supports, which offer supportive resources for those who are caring for a loved one, and that could be a spouse, a neighbor, a parent, a child with disabilities. It really varies, but it's strategically positioned to help those caring for someone they love have the resources to continue to do so. And this does include people living with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia. There's also coordination of adult protective services across the state. And we also have an Illinois Pathway to Health program, which is statewide, and they do a lot of health managing and chronic management of conditions or pain and help provide educational content to the community. There's the Senior Medicare Patrol program that's also statewide, and it empowers beneficiaries in Illinois to prevent, detect, and report healthcare fraud. And there's a couple of cultural services and support to some of our CLAWS or cultural linguistically assisted service agencies. It's a new acronym. I'm happy to share our kind of overall general review or overview flyer with Lee to make sure she hands it out with everybody, but I'll see if I can enter that into the chat. With that being said, I throw this back over to Nina to continue.
Well, and Christina, before you go ahead and begin, I do want to make sure that because people hearing about the Area Agency on Aging, I think is really important. And there are, like Christina said, there are 13 of them throughout the state of Illinois. So every single community has an Area Agency on Aging. And I think that's important for everybody to know because there's so many amazing services through Area Agency on Aging. They all operate a little bit differently, but for the most piece of information for us all to know is that the services are available that people need to take advantage of as you're aging in the community. There are just so many amazing things. We have done a resident and family support council on the Area Agency on Aging in the past, so you can look that up on YouTube. You can also go to any of the Area Agency on Aging's websites or the Illinois Department on Aging. You can get to the links through that. So I just want to make sure that everybody really hears this, because they do such amazing things, such as what Nina's going to share with us right now. This wonderful, amazing, innovative, proactive thing that, that Age Options is doing in the Chicagoland area. So Nina, pass it off to you.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you to the Illinois Long-Term Care Ombudsman Resident and Family Support Council for having us today. Happy Pride Month to everyone. So just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview, LGBTQ plus older adults live in every community and have unique needs. Thrive with Pride by Age Options offers one replicable program model that responds to social isolation and traditionally limited engagement in aging services experienced by LGBTQ plus older adults and those who care for them in suburban Cook County. So we organize social and informational events that connect LGBT older adults and those who care for them to the aging network that we just described a little bit of services and resources in order to increase their social connectedness and overall well-being. So I'll dive a little bit into the strategy or the thought behind the program and what the design looks like. Lee had also asked I share some of our successes and lessons learned along the way. We'll highlight some other newer initiatives we're working on, and we'll include a tie back to your communities and how folks might be able to join our events or just stay abreast of advocacy that's coming down the pipeline. So as I had said, Thrive with Pride is our program for LGBT older adults and those who care for them. It came about in about late 2019, so this is right before the pandemic. Initially envisioned as a fully in-person program, which we were forced to pivot very quickly at the onset of COVID to an all-online program, which still majority of our programming is online, but we'll dive into that a little deeper in a minute. We were able to create this model based off of some existing research and existing program models. So, the research indicating that there's a need for safe spaces for LGBTQ older adults to gather, stigma-free without judgment, and also the need to build community and have trusted hubs of information, especially as it relates to aging services. And so we're kind of borrowing from our Caring Together, Living Better program and our memory cafes, and then pairing that research in. That's sort of the model we developed. Early funding came from the Chicago Community Trust, LGBTQ Community Fund. So that had us looking to the western suburbs, nearish our office in Oak Park, as we got started. And then future funds from, Community Memorial Foundation was first, then Chicago Community Trust. And then during COVID, some of the American Rescue Plan Act funding helped us to continue our work to address social isolation that was obviously increasing during the pandemic. And now we use Older Americans Act funding and unrestricted funding from Age Options to continue our work. So a little bit about the program design. It's sort of a two-pronged approach. Age Options, or myself, hosts these informational, educational events featuring topics of interest to our participants, usually an aging or LGBT-related topic, followed by Q&A. We then take that content and provide follow-up discussion guides to our cafe partners that we work with so that they can host their own follow-up events. And so our cafe partners, that's the second prong, we ask them to meet at least once a month, providing safe and welcoming space for LGBT older adults and caregivers to congregate and learn more about their more localized resources and whatever format works best for their participants. So some are in person and hybrid, and some are still virtual just because that's a tough habit to break now that we've learned with that access, we can reach more people. So some folks still find that to be the best way to reach individuals. If there's anyone who has any visual impairments, just pointing out the pictures here are screenshots of our most recent online event. Paula Basta, former Illinois Department on Aging Director, presented to us in her new role at the Illinois Assistive Technology Program. And then the bottom picture is an image of one of our Thrive with Pride cafes doing a hybrid meeting. So the partners I mentioned, we are able to use that funding that I mentioned at the beginning to provide small stipends to community-based organizations and affirming church partners to help us broaden the scope of inclusive and accessible aging services in suburban Cook County. As we know, that's quite a large service area, so we couldn't do this work without the help of our partners. Right now, those Senior Center in Bellwood, Holy Covenant AC in Summit, and you'll see that on the map on the right. That's where those are located, and as you can see, it's sort of a Western focus based on that original funding that had us looking in that area. We also have a widespread community of collaborators and allies who help us publicize and often attend our events. So they are geared towards LGBT older adults and those who care for them. We say that loosely, right? It's not just traditional caregivers. It could be service providers as well. But again, the intended audience is the LGBTQ older adults.
So Nina, if I could just interject for a minute there. So the three that are listed on the screen, West Suburban Senior Center, Holy Covenant, and Pillar of Love Fellowship, those are the three cafe partners so that's where they do that follow-up that you were talking about?
Yes. So the one in Bellwood at West Suburban Senior Center is one of the hybrid sites I mentioned. So they do some in-person as well as virtual meetings.
Okay.
I'm not remembering the days and times off the top of my head, but they are listed on our website. I'll share that. Holy Covenant is a virtual meeting, as is Pillar of Love Fellowship. That is a virtual church. So. Beyond that, like I said, we work with the partners we're not in a position to bring on any new funded partners at this time, but we are always looking to work with collaborators or other community agencies that have a vested interest in age option services, but also outside of our AAA region, if there's folks in need, right? That's one of the benefits of having the virtual programming, is if there are folks on the outskirts of where we're looking, hopefully they can still join us too, which is something that is available to residents. If you all have access to technology where you're at, you are able to join our meeting the same as anybody else. We do have folks join from other places in the state outside of suburban Cook County, whether they lived here and they moved, or they just don't have other resources in their service area. So don't feel like if you're in suburban Cook, you can't access our online events.
And I think that's important for people to know, because I don't know if many areas are doing things like the Thrive, cafes that you are doing. I think that so people may not have it in their area. So to know that there is an entity, but you don't have to necessarily live in that entity to participate in it, so that you can at least still have that opportunity. So I think thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know some of the other work kind of exists in different pockets of the state. So I think someone from downstate will share some things after we're done chatting today. But yeah, we want to connect folks where we can, and where they're living in Illinois shouldn't be a barrier, at least when we're doing these online programs. So another somewhat newer initiative is intergenerational events. So these are something that sort of came out of like a byproduct of what we call SAGE tables that happened during the pandemic virtually. My predecessor organized those. I don't know how she did. They were a lot of moving parts to do those, to get people meals and be all online at once. So I commend her for that. But coming off the pandemic, we needed to get folks together in person again, and wanted to do so by creating intentional intergenerational spaces for older and younger LGBTQ community members to connect. And so this is just a little insight into why we do that sort of thing, to combat social isolation. There's an assumption that that's only an experience for older adults, but young people are also experiencing social isolation. We want to preserve the rich and complicated histories of sexual and gender minorities. We want to learn from one another, so it's not just the older generation teaching the younger generation. It's two-way learning and engagement, and also to draw on joy and strengths of community members of all ages. And the font looks a little small. It was just meant to be a little sample of some community agreements that we created for when we bring together folks in an intergenerational way. So I won't go into them in depth, but just getting folks to agree that we're going to practice mutual respect and what that looks like in terms of using folks' names and pronouns, being mindful of boundaries and language that we're using to describe ourselves. Also valuing impact over intent. So while you might not mean to harm someone with your words or actions, those impacts can still be felt. So how do we address those in the moment and do better next time? And then making space for all voices. So again, since we're bringing these groups together intentionally, everyone is coming with their own knowledge and lived experiences, and everyone has something to contribute. So emphasizing these agreements before any of those events. So I'll pause on some of these photos. I'll go through them a little slower. These are the couple of intergenerational events we had starting back in April of 2024. These are kind of sponsorship, as sponsorship funding allows. So this first one we had to break that in-person ice was a dinner and dialogue. I believe that was sponsored by Advocate. So you've got a group shot here, some folks chatting around a table. And laughing at a joke. Hopefully it was one I told. So yeah, a great sense of community and also one-on-one interaction. So meeting new people, also old friends connecting across Chicagoland for this first event. The second event we had was a brunch and dialogue, so similar. And that one was at Aging Care Connections in LaGrange. So similar concept, just having folks come together around certain discussion topics over a meal to share and learn from one another and learn about other resources in their area. And then this was our most recent and probably my favorite event so far was our intergenerational trivia night. We had that at West Suburban Senior Center there in Bellwood, our cafe site, in March. And so that was more focused on just doing a collective activity, building collective joy. And yeah, it was a great time. Our next intergenerational event is going to be this Friday, actually, for Pride Month. We're calling it Friends of Thrive. So in an effort to kind of bring together all of our past, present, and future program participants, partners, presenters, community members, and allies to join us in celebrating our program's history and envisioning its future together. So the program's been running, I had said, since late 2019, so we're going on over 5 years now. And so we want to envision what the next 5 years looks like together in community. We'll have mocktails, music, a buffet. That is up at Levy Senior Center in Evanston. Another one of the newer initiatives is our Aging Network training that we are right in the throes of beginning to pilot. And so that is in our effort to broaden the scope of inclusive and accessible aging services in suburban Cook County. Age Options has implemented a training requirement in our standards to all of the agencies we are funding in fiscal year 2025 to 2027. And so, we implore all aging service organizations to seek out appropriate and reputable LGBT training from someone like Sage, right? That Sage Care, I'll share those resources. They do excellent training and credentialing programs. Sometimes those have a cost. So what Age Options is offering our funded partners is a free training, very sort of baseline background knowledge as a stepping stone to continued learning. And so we are training leadership, staff, and volunteers at our caregiver resource centers and aging and disability resource network partners on key terms and affirming language, acute issues facing our community, best practices and ideas to put into action, and things like how to collect sexual orientation and gender identity data. I will share some of those resources toward the end too. But essentially, we're just aiming to build a more welcoming and affirming network across Cook County, right? So we have our partners for this program, but how do we reach more folks and embed what we're doing at an organizational level is the end goal of this, right? Once we train all of our funded agencies, the network just becomes more inclusive as it expands.
Nina, I'm curious if this is something, and I'm asking for my own personal perspective, is this something that we can share with the Ombudsman to attend this training, or how would that work?
Yeah, so we are prioritizing Age Options funded partners for this first launch of the program. That's not to say it won't be available beyond that in the future, but we're really taking this time early on to get feedback from the handful of partners we're piloting with so that we can adapt the training and kind of bring it to a fuller, more developed form before we roll out to the rest of our aging network. So certainly we could stay connected on that, but we are prioritizing our funded partners right now.
Thank you. That could be very, very helpful for us. So thank you.
Yes. Lee had asked me to share a couple of successes and lessons learned. So a couple of things I want to highlight. We did a focus group, which was something kind of new for us last year. We had previously done some long form annual surveys that maybe didn't have the best response. So we were trying to look at other ways to get feedback in real time. So we brought in both old or returning participants as well as new participants to try and gauge what kind of programming is meaningful to folks or what are barriers to folks accessing our programming. So that was good, and we were able to share that feedback with our partners in order to improve and expand our programming. The first in-person intergenerational events I mentioned, diversifying our presenters and topics. So just making sure we're bringing in BIPOC and a transgender and non-binary representation to our presentations and topics, as well as continuing to try new things based off the feedback we receive through post-event surveying, but also just, our partners are our direct line to our participants and those we're trying to reach. So they share back to us sort of what they're hearing and what the interests are among their participants. Some lessons learned from challenges. We've learned a lot of lessons. So I will say, with the digital space, it's not without risks, particularly Zoom. And when you have open meetings, you kind of open yourself up to vulnerabilities. And so we certainly experienced that, having some bad actors early on in Zoom. So quickly pivoted to create registration process and develop internal safety procedures. So always making sure we have another staff member on and that we're able to respond in real time should any situations arise during our meetings. Outreach struggles, that's just something that is always an issue, right? Making sure the community is aware of the resources that exist for them, but you have to meet them where they're at. So finding how to get them the information. For us this year, it's like implementing a new newsletter, trying some things on Facebook, press, just no stone left unturned to get creative to reach people because not everybody's getting their information from the same sources.
And if we can help with that through the Ombudsman Program, no, I would like to offer that out. We do have, a lot of large representation in your area through the Ombudsman Program, and we do have people that live in long-term care that do integrate well with the community who may not be aware that that this exists, and it may be a really great opportunity for them because in long-term care they might not find some of that support mechanism and that ability to be able to have relationship building. So this could be a good avenue for them since their long-term care community might not be doing it, is to embrace the community at large for something like this. So if there's information, again, that you can share with us, that would be amazing. I also did see a question. I think someone else was thinking just like I am. There was a question in the chat about, are you connecting with social service departments in long-term care? And that is something that we can do as ombudsman. We can share that information just in the area. Or I don't know if you're okay with us sharing it across the state. That's something, for you guys to see, because I think Dana, I think your idea is a great avenue to do it. And as ombudsman, because we do go into every long-term care community in the state, we could be an avenue to help promote that for you. Just to be aware.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that offer of support. I think certainly in our service area, I don't specifically collect connect with social service providers in long-term care, but we're fully transparent. Long-term care is not our sort of our forte setting. We do know other folks, and some of the resources I share are a bit more well-versed in that setting. But certainly, like I said, if there's access to technology for folks to join our online events,
Yeah.
happy to share.
Yeah, many people in long-term care became very technology savvy during the pandemic because that was how they got a lot of their engagement was through using mediums such as Zoom and stuff like that. But then also we also have people that live in supportive livings or assisted livings. So people may not necessarily live in a nursing home, but they would live in a less physical need oriented area, and that this might be a really great avenue for them to be able to get some better support because I don't feel that long-term care does a very good job with this, which will bring us to that conversation at the very end of today, how we can do better with that. But, just some food for thought because we're always, as Ombudsman, we're always want to be partners with anybody that we can to help spread messaging so that people can all get their needs met.
Absolutely.
Yes, and also the comment was made that non-LGBTQ may want to know how to respectfully interact in long-term care. So there might be even an avenue for doing something along those lines. So
yeah, I think that's something that'll be covered in the resources I go.
Wonderful. Great. See, we're thinking and
You're
jumping
already
ahead.
taking a couple steps ahead. No, asking the right questions. So yeah, just to round out some of the lessons learned, especially as we got into intergenerational work, leaning into local LGBT youth organizations for some guidance, and also internally to develop community agreements like the ones I showed, right? Because working with young folks is not necessarily our forte age options either, and so we need to just involve those who do that work regularly in our thinking and planning. And then strengthening existing relationships by trying to embed support at the organizational level moving forward. So that's sort of referencing our idea behind the training that we'll be piloting is that not every organization can have like a champion or have a dedicated staff member doing this work, like we're fortunate to at Age Options. And so how do we sort of, embed LGBTQ inclusion across the aging network so we're not relying on individual staff and then you're not so susceptible to things like turnover or staffing cuts or funding changes. So trying to plan for the future in that way.
And that always becomes a challenge in this path. It really, truly does. We run into the same challenges with our meetings here. So we recognize where you're, and that's why anybody who wants to help promote these, we're all on top of it.
Excellent. So kind of getting into some of what you all were asking about, just reiterating that we have friends that are doing work or have done work to gather resources for long-term care. So what I'm about to share now is from a presentation that Britta Larson, the Pride and Aging Director at Center on Halsted, shared actually with our Thrive with Pride participants. She came and presented to us at the beginning of the year on navigating senior living options. So she gave me permission to share some of these resources with you all, so we didn't reinvent the wheel there. How does our community factor into the mainstream long-term care setting? Important to note that in 2019, Illinois enacted legislation prohibiting discrimination against LGBT plus residents of assisted living and shared housing facilities. Some research coming out of AARP, the Maintaining Dignity study, just kind of highlights where some folks' heads are at around this. So when thinking about entering long-term care facilities, 52% of lesbian, gay, and bisexual older adults say they would hide their identity in that setting. And that number increases greatly to 70% of trans and gender expansive older adults feel that they would need to hide their identity in long-term care settings for fear of neglect, abuse, potentially limit access to services, or verbal or physical harassment. And so that's just highlighting kind of some of the fear or stigma that exists. And the research that's being done to kind of bring that to light and then respond to it.
And I think that also brings the point up about if there can be a support mechanism, because they typically don't exist right now in long-term care, to be able to have individuals participate in what it is that you all are doing. It might help even them to be able to have that conversation in their own long-term community. So they might even be able to take what you guys are doing, but do it in a very small capacity within the content of their long-term care community, So
Yeah, absolutely.
that'd be a model.
The model we offer, like I said, it is just one model, but it is kind of replicable and adaptable to smaller communities. So if there are staff within agencies that are looking to get this work started, or even if there's residents that are vocal or wanting to create some sort of groups, things like that, so that there's something they can sort of borrow from the model.
Uh-huh.
Um,
True.
But yeah, as it relates to finding affirming community, you might be familiar with some of these I already mentioned. Sage care training, and this is sort of geared towards someone looking for a community, but sage care is also something that individual long-term care communities can engage with to have deeper cultural competency training in this area.
Huh.
And then the long-term care equality index, which is sort of a listing of inclusive long-term care facilities, and that's like a nationwide effort. So I can't speak to these too much. I just know that those are sources people can reference when they're looking for affirming community, as well as a lot of great guides that exist coming out of SAGE, the Human Rights Campaign, and the National Resource Center on LGBT Aging. So tips for finding LGBT affirming services. And any of these tip guides can sort of be flipped, right? So if I'm someone looking for housing, I can look at these tips and see what I should be looking for, but I think they can be flipped as someone working in a long-term care setting. How can we create this type of environment for folks who might be wanting to stay in our facility?
Oh, these are wonderful resources. Really appreciate sharing it, because I think
Yes, shout out to Britta.
yeah, it's things we didn't even know existed and really can help in all the advocacy work I know that we do as ombudsman. But I love the idea of being able to take that and flip it, to be able to help long-term care staff be able to look at that and see how we could do better. So wonderful.
So I'll share. I mean, the links are here, but I can share it too afterwards. Sage.
And will you share the PowerPoint with me so that we can post this onto our website?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Sage has a full library of resources on not just this, but so many other topics, and they're really a national leader in this field that I look to quite often in our work. So.
Great.
So just some questions. And again, these are questions I can ask as someone exploring a potential living situation, but also internally as a staff member. What does the non-discrimination policy look like? Are there any LGBT staff? Has there been any training or certification done? Do folks participate in the long-term care equality index? Is there an affinity group? What kind of activities are offered? What are the policies around cohabitation? Is there an openness for me to speak to other residents to learn about their experiences? And what are the policies on bullying and harassment between residents? Because that's also a concern that some LGBTQ older adults have, is about how they're being treated by their peers in these settings, beyond just staff. So some visual, verbal, physical cues an individual could look for, but staff could work to implement, is imagery of same-sex couples or of trans individuals in their flyers, brochures, obviously rainbow flag, but we know just putting a sticker on a window isn't enough to do this work, but it's one way to indicate a safe space. Prominent displays of the policies I just mentioned. So somewhere when if someone's looking up your site, they can clearly see that those policies are important to the organization and that they're out for people to see and find easily. And inclusive language on forms. So as I mentioned, that one guide about how to start asking questions about sexual orientation and gender identity, and kind of acknowledging family, like what your definition of family is and how that can look different in our community, and being open to those differences. And then I think these are kind of simple, but I think really powerful sentiments about asking friends about their experiences. So Word of mouth is still, I think, one of the most powerful tools in our field and in this community. Is if people can share whether they had a good or bad experience somewhere, and also leaning into providers and organizations that they trust and can recommend places where they've seen success. And then a handful of other resources. So I will share this National Resource Center on LGBT Aging. So resources broken down by state, some caregiving resources, housing rights, SAGE I mentioned, and some consumer rights. Here's another one of the guides on best practices. And then something I just recently learned about, another committee I'm on. In other states, there has been LGBTQ plus long-term care Bill of Rights. So Massachusetts and Minnesota are two. I have heard that this is something our state might be doing some advocacy on at some point soon. That's really all I know, just from word of mouth and in some of these committees, but something to be on the lookout for if staff or residents want to get involved in any kind of advocacy efforts. That is all I have for you. So thank you again for giving us your time. Please let us know if you have any questions. I'll certainly share the slides and resources with Lee to give out to the group, but happy to answer questions.
See, I think we've been answering these all along. We've got a lot of resources in the chat as well. So while people are formulating any questions they may have or putting any comments into the chat, please do feel free. I would like to introduce Kate. Kate, are you here?
Yes, I am.
There's Kate. Okay, Kate. Kate, do you want to go ahead? Kate is with in Springfield, Illinois. She is a long-term care ombudsman in Springfield, Illinois, and they're doing something special down there. And so we invited them to come to present today, so that they could talk a little bit about what's happening in their area in regards to increasing awareness in long-term care as well. Kate, you want to share a little bit about who you are and about the program?
Certainly. Yeah, thank you for allowing me a chance to chat about some of these things. I have been with the Ombudsman Program since 2017, and we have chosen as our local initiative for this year. I'm in Region 7, which includes Springfield, so we're downstate. And we have chosen as our initiative for this year to try to help facilities increase their visibility to LGBTQ plus persons and help create a safe environment in those facilities. So what we're doing, of course, is echoing a lot of what you all were speaking about through age options there. So I worked, I think the first 2 months of this year to put together a presentation that we can offer to our facilities in the area. It's has 4 different components. This was all born out of the fact that we were going into facilities and being asked by administrators about specific situations related to LGBTQ plus persons, asking what the regulations were pertaining to their rights. And as I'm sure you all are aware, there are no set rights in place as far as things specific to the LGBTQ community in the regulations through the Department of Public Health. So what we kind of worked on was trying to interpret those rights through the existing regulations to be able to give them some sort of guidance in those situations of how to deal with specific situations. As was mentioned, obviously, there's a huge fear that LGBTQ persons have of going into long-term care. I think something like 80% express just significant anxiety, apprehension to go into care. And many of them come from strained social networks, strained relationships with family anyway. So their need for care outside of the traditional setting is increased because of that. So, through the way that I had kind of set up this training, it kind of falls into 4 different components, and all of these can be kind of mixed and matched in a way that would be appropriate for the facility and what their needs are. Each one could easily be probably an hour-long training. obviously to dedicate that much time is pretty difficult for staff at a facility. We do talk about being able to just present it to upper management, maybe, and have them pass things down if need be. But I'm doing a presentation to 30 to 40 people tomorrow at a facility. So, so the initial part, of course, is just introducing about the Ombudsman Program, the role that we play. And then, of course, going through basic terms, trying to help people understand just the nuances of the LGBTQ community and the terminology that's used. Talking about understanding transgender folks and kind of that whole experience and how that relates to, things as far as just the right to be addressed by the correct pronoun and the correct titles.
Can you speak to that, the pronouns, the correct pronouns? I hear questions from people all the time regarding that and the importance of that. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, and again, I'll try to do it quickly. The analogy that I usually use is if you think about a soda bottle, if you think about a bottle of Mountain Dew, and for some reason in the factory, Coke is put inside the Mountain Dew bottle instead of Mountain Dew. And people experience this going to like a sporting event or a concert where they'll serve drinks all in the same cup, but what's inside the cup is different. And so how you address what drink it is that you're getting is like, oh, I got the Mountain Dew, oh, I got the Pepsi, oh, I got the root beer. And so you're addressing what's inside the cup. And so that's how I kind of use the analogy for pronouns is you're addressing what's inside the person. So it's differentiating between sex and gender, where sex is kind of the package that somebody comes in, and gender is what's inside. And so when you're using the correct pronoun, you're acknowledging who they are inside and not the package on the outside. Just like if you were going to get the Pepsi, bottle in the fridge that had the Mountain Dew in it, you'd say, "Oh, can you grab me the Mountain Dew?" We do it in other circumstances, but for some reason, people feel like act like it's difficult, I guess, in reality for people.
Oh, and that's really important. I just think for that's such a good messaging, and I'm sure you're covering that in that training that you're doing for staff, because it does become a piece of in that greater awareness. You don't know what you don't know. And the way you phrase that is really, really helpful. I think
actually there's kind of a worksheet that's part of that where it's like we go through each one and have different, like, here's this bottle with this, liquid in it, like how would you refer to it?
Uh-huh.
And again, still, it comes down to just asking, which, you can't always tell from appearance, and a person presenting is just trying to give helpful hints as to what that gender is on the inside. As I always have to remind myself, I actually run a transgender support group here in Springfield, and I have to remind myself as well. There are people who are transgender who don't present at all. And so it's just a matter of you're acknowledging who they are inside, not even based on any visual cues at all.
Cool. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think that I wanted to bring that forward just as an illustration of one of the messaging that can be so beneficial for long-term care staff to hear and understand.
Definitely. And even tying that into specific things like the right to privacy is that misgendering somebody is actually violating their privacy. So if a person, and that's why training, does seep all the way down to like a receptionist or somebody in the business office, those type of things, is that simply by misgendering somebody, you're already letting other people know that person's transgender. You do not have permission to disclose.
Right. True.
Very good point. Lots of really important nuances for that. The process then that we go through, the second component is becoming a safe, welcoming space for residents. And so I kind of walk them through a whole process. I've set it up as a chronological process where you're looking at, a facility would be looking at just I think as Nina had mentioned, the advertisement that's going out, when I call it the pre-need stage. So this is before somebody even needs to come into care, starts looking for care. What is a facility already doing to make that known out in the community that they are a welcoming, safe place? And it has to do, of course, and it's to the benefit of the current residents and those currently looking, but also just going ahead and putting the message out there for, as people do age and the need comes up, that they'll already know of, existing facilities that are welcoming to that. We talk about, again, stickers, going through the SAGE care training, using the LEI, to help look at their different programs and things like that and how they can be more welcoming. Advertisements, print advertisements, online advertisements, again, just any of that messaging. I always say that if something's not out there, if a business, facility, anything out there does not somehow indicate that they're welcoming or friendly, the assumption is that they're not.
Mm.
And so unless you're actually putting it out there, people are going to assume that you're not welcoming. So it's important, and that's what we try to emphasize to people, is that it needs to be pretty loud and clear.
That makes a lot of sense.
In having the representation also, like they were talking about, in advertising and things like that too. If people don't look like them, as well as staff that look like them. So yeah, the first stage is the pre-need. The second one is the tour. So like, what is it that a person would be looking for? That person who discloses that they are part of the LGBTQ community, what sort of things would they be looking for in the community? Those who don't say anything, but still come for the tour, what type of things would they be looking for? The facility can already have in place that would indicate, to a prospective resident that they're a welcoming facility, such as the non-discrimination statements, and, posters and things like that that are out. Even having, a logo that's in a rainbow, or different artwork, or, things like that that indicate that, again, there's all those little clues that can be dropped. So yeah, the tour, and then the process of admission, which of course would be going through looking at, at each of these stages, which staff members would be responsible for interacting with that person. So we're talking all the way from, the graphic design media people to, the receptionist, to, whoever might be answering the phone for phone calls, using the correct pronouns again, in identifying the staff at each stage of this. So through the process of admission, of course, it'd be reviewing the paperwork, the admission paperwork, the language of that, reviewing it to try to weed out heteronormativity, which is just assuming, again, that everybody is heteronormative, and working from that assumption, rather than thinking that somebody might actually be part of the LGBTQ community. And then as well as their residency, which of course then includes their rights, which includes, everything from room assignments to, visitation, again, to who is included or considered part of this expanded family network, to, dealing with harassment from other residents, which is actually the biggest concern that I think residents have a history of expressing, as well as family members, visitors that come and might harass as well. So, of course, in my work in putting this together, of course, we did bump up a lot against the Bill of Rights, from other states that do exist. I think there are maybe 7 territories, maybe in the US now, that do have bills of rights. I've actually been on the side, kind of away from my professional work, compiling what I would hope, potentially someday could form maybe the backbones of a Bill of Rights for Illinois. Trying to again, not reinvent the wheel, but look at what's already been done and try to build, put something together with that. One of the things I have noticed is that it's kind of interesting, just looking through the bills of rights, is that you can kind of tell which populations they didn't consult, in the process of putting those together, because there are gaps in some of those rights, especially related to non-binary people, gender expansive people, that aren't necessarily addressed. So again, I think with each version maybe of the Bill of Rights that are developed, it gets a little bit more clear and a little bit more specific, and maybe a little bit more perfect. So that's one of the things I've also just been working on the side, and hope to be able to continue that process as well. And of course, included in the resident rights, of course, is the right to stay at a facility that they want to, to not be transferred or discharged based on anything related to sexual orientation or gender identity. And then, of course, the biggest component is obviously culture change of the facility, which culture change is a product of cognitive change. And so that's trying to just walk staff through the process of understanding that LGBTQ experience, and, not just having it be something that's just, not being done because it has to be, but something that they actually understand. And that makes sense, because I think it has a lot more meaning to it and sticks a lot more if they understand it.
Mhm.
And then also, of course, just looking at regulations pertaining to staff who might refuse to provide care for somebody because of their identity or sexual orientation, and how to deal with those situations, and liability for the facilities as well. So as I often reference that, Stonewall happened back in the 60s. The persons who were around back then, were probably in their 20s. So you think about, as they age, those people are going to have already started coming into care and are going to continue to come into care in greater numbers. I think they're saying that 30% of Gen Zers, I think it is, identify as being somewhere within the LGBTQ community. So 1 in 3. So it's not going away. It's something that's
Mhm.
certainly just going to increase over time. And so we're offering, again, that as a resource to facilities in our area, to try to help them prepare for that, for the situations that they already have going on, and also just to be prepared for what's coming, and to be a safe, welcoming place for people, again, who are terrified to enter into care.
And someone did make the comment that they didn't think a long-term care facility could not be welcoming or discriminate. And I think really the point is that people don't know that they're doing it. There's a huge piece. It's like you don't know what you don't know. And unless you open it up to a conversation is when you're going to start to become more aware of how inadvertently you may be sending a message that you didn't even know you were sending. And by providing an educational opportunity such as what you guys are doing to the long-term care communities in the Springfield area, you guys are providing that opportunity for people to have conversations, increase awareness, and start hearing what they don't know.
Right.
And those are important, I think, really important messaging that you guys are doing in that area, and hopefully can help be replicated. And that's one of the things about the Ombudsman Program is we do share, and we share alike. And so while they're almost, you could say, piloting something like this, I'm sure that they will be sharing with the rest of us so that we can all do better across the entire state of Illinois.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think even people that are there are people who are allies, of the community, who, again, inadvertently are offensive or inappropriate, or don't say, necessarily the right things, and they're not meaning to. It's just that, again, it's nuanced language and things like that. So
Yeah.
I'm a transgender woman, and but I've been asked before of like, well, how do people respond to you? And it's like, well, what do you mean? Like, how do they how do they respond to you? Like,
Yeah.
the implication being because you're transgender.
Right.
And
Right.
so, it's just those things and that's kind of how you find the gaps, I think, in who's consulted with things, is that there are certain nuances that are just particular to different identities and different sexual orientations and things like that aren't necessarily covered in those things. And again, I am trying to combine as much of that as I can into the work that I'm doing, to try to hopefully just all those rights that people don't necessarily see or are aware of, just because of heteronormativity privilege, as they call it,
Yeah.
so.
It's true. And so I really feel that today's conversation was such a great way to be able to dive into Pride Month for us all, to be able to look at it from the perspective of aging in Illinois, of looking at it from those who are living in the community, and opportunities to be able to connect and engage. And then also through people that are living and working in long-term care, and what can happen there, and how we need to explore what it is that we actually are doing so that we can do it better. And that really is part of the mission of the Ombudsman Program, is for long-term care communities to explore how they're doing so that we could do it better for those people that live there. I do know we have just hit the 4 o'clock hour. You guys couldn't have planned this better. It's actually worked out so perfectly with the timing of everything. I really just want to publicly thank Nina, Christina, Kate, I want to thank you guys for sharing your knowledge, for being able to share with us what you all are doing, because we need to know what we don't know, and this is one way of us doing it. I will stop the recording right now, but I will open up for any other questions, because sometimes people don't like to ask questions when we are recording. So I will stop the recording, and I just again want to say thank you so much publicly for providing this for